Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Bucket List. We're back again on YouTube, back again, myself and Evan, to discuss our interview with Giles Paley-Phillips. So Evan actually missed this interview and probably doesn't have, probably a lot of people might not know who Giles is, if particularly a kind of Irish audience, I'd say. Um, so the book that he's coming on to talk about is a book called Blank, which he's actually written himself. So for us, it's pretty interesting because it's the first time we've had like an author on of a book that they've written themselves, which is cool. So he's been kind of doing the rounds the last few weeks on, the likes of BBC, etc., to promote the book. And basically, what the book is it's called Blank, and he has a podcast called Blank as well with his co-host Jim Daly. And basically, they go on and interview famous people about their blank moments in life. So it's interesting from that point of view that the book is kind of like the lessons that they've learned from doing the kind of, I think it's like 200 episodes or like 250 episodes or something over the past number of years, and learnings from the people that they've interviewed. So the likes of Stephen Fry, Don French, Gary Lineker, many more. Really good podcast, actually. I'd really recommend the Stephen Fry one as well. That was
So,
episode 100.
in terms of like what topics would they cover in the book and on the podcast?
Yeah. So they've kind of tried to take the main themes from the podcast that kind of kept recurring. So for example, they talked about the imposter syndrome that a lot of people have felt on the podcast when they've become kind of famous. So that, like, I think a really good example of that was Gary Lineker. I think it's like he scored a hat trick for England and then like he scored a hat trick for Barcelona and then scored 4 goals for England pretty quickly after. And he was like 26 at this time. And he ran back to the halfway line after scoring the fourth goal for England. And he looked at Brian Robson, who's obviously a really famous former Manchester United player, and was like, I'm so lucky. Like, how is this happening to me? And Brian Robson was like, sod off, like, idiot. Obviously, you're just trying to make yourself sound humble, kind of thing. But it was actually a really interesting story, just in the way that it was told. And like, I did genuinely believe it, that, and you can kind of sense those moments when things are going right for you in your own life, and you're like, whoa, I didn't really do that much for this to happen. Um,
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, but at the same time, he was already good enough to play for Barcelona in England
yeah,
at
okay,
that time as well. So if he's only realizing that he's lucky after scoring 4 goals and a hat trick while playing for Barcelona in England, you
yeah.
know,
There's
what
another story in the podcast or in the book about Don, or no, it's not Don French, or is it Don French? It could be, but it's about an actress that moves to New York, and I think she's like a country kind of girl from the UK, and it's basically about how she went to the city and she was really scared, but she kind of realized then that when she went to a new place, that none of the people she had met had any like frame of reference for who she was, so she could kind of just become who she
become
wanted.
whoever you want.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting, again, like, people sometimes would, like, when they go to a different place, or even when, like, people go down to the Gaeltacht and don't know anyone, they can recreate themselves, or move to a new school, you can recreate yourself. And it's a great opportunity, but also, you'd wonder, why are those people recreating themselves as well? Like, because they didn't like who they were, or were they running from something, or...
yeah, yeah. Like, I suppose we probably all had that, like, when you've not seen someone from your secondary school for a long time that went to like a different college and you met them and they're either more confident or a bit more edgy, maybe become a bit more artsy or something.
Yeah, it's always mad to see when you do see someone a few years later and they've completely changed.
Hmm.
Great to see as well, though, like, that they've kind of like found who they really are and adapted to that. Like,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and as well, one thing in the book as well is social media, and Giles has kind of like a positive take on social media, that like that he wouldn't have been able to make connections for the podcast without social media, because people do actually reply. And that's one thing I've found, actually, as much as we kind of berate social media, the fact that you can kind of just message someone and the half chance that they'll reply, like, what, 30 years ago, or like less, even 10, 15, you'd send a letter, and like, what are the chances?
Absolutely. It would usually be like a secretary, if like a person who was relatively famous or relatively successful, like it'd be a secretary opening them, and only the stuff that would interest them they'd actually see, or like that would interest the secretary. Whereas social media just cuts out that middleman. You can get directly to the source, and it is brilliant in that sense. Like it's absolutely amazing how like we've like just our last 10 guests, how we've been able to reach out to people on LinkedIn and Twitter and been able to get those guests, whereas before that this just wouldn't have been possible. So
Yeah, no, like that is the thing. And that's what we were talking about. Like, is it cool to be negative towards social media these days rather than positive? Whereas like 10 years ago, it was like everyone has to get on Facebook. It's the coolest thing ever. Instagram's so cool. Whereas now, when we've kind of linked it to negative mental health, like obviously overuse of social media is terrible. But like if you use it well, the positives are never ending, really.
absolutely, yeah. No, it's just trying to find that balance, but like find that balance is the whole hard thing about it. Like,
yeah, it's so addictive.
It's about who you follow and like who you engage with, like, and also you kind of have to realize that like social media is fake at the end of the day. Like some of the stuff you see on Twitter, you're just like, this just isn't real. So it's kind of figuring out that, and also you kind of just I think you either take it or leave it, like there, and it's just such a hard thing. Like I think like social media companies really just need to start implementing things like when you're opening gambling, like an online betting account, you have to give your passport, and it's one account per person. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the big TikTok, all these big social media companies really need to do that, and it's the only way anything's going to change. And until they do that, nothing is going to change. Like in this upcoming weekend, or by the time this will be out, I think from Friday morning until Monday evening, all the 20 Premier League clubs are refusing to go on social media. And I honestly don't see what impact that's going to have at all. Like at all. Like they're going to not tweet out anything, and that's it. Is it gonna like, and then on Tuesday morning you'll still get your racial abuse, you're just the worst things in the world, and it's not going to change at all. Like,
yeah, it's interesting because Dove are doing a thing as well where they're trying to spread awareness for that young women, or like young girls, not women, are using like those filter apps from like the age of 10 years old. It's like some ridiculous statistic that like 1 in 7 women or something use those. 1 in 7 girls again are you using those from a really young age. So it seems like it's as well when, yeah, I don't know what it does. It could, because yeah, as you said, if there's buy-in still from, like if every football fan is still using using Twitter during those days, it doesn't really matter. And if every girl is still using the filtering things, it doesn't
absolutely,
really matter.
Like it's obviously it'll get a lot of news, and it'll bring the topic into the news, which is always a good thing. But like, will anything actually change? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But I wouldn't be too confident.
But yeah, I think we'll move on and let the conversation flow. Jaws, really, really nice guy. Interesting story as well, just from his life. A lot of life experience, a lot of grief from in his family, and really just open about talking about things, which is great. And kind of was able to ask him any questions. So that was really nice. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So, Jaws, you're very, very welcome to the podcast. Thanks a million for coming on. It's great to have. You're our first author to actually come on. So far, we've only had people that have kind of picked a book that's their favorite. So it's great to actually speak to someone that's written a book.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I suppose if you could give some context to your new book, Blank, and kind of where it came from.
Yeah, so I did this podcast with a comedian called Daly. We started doing it, I guess it was sort of like the end of 2018. Both of us were suffering from like creative. I mean, the title of the podcast is Blanks, and that was kind of how the only word I could use to express what I was going through. I mean, obviously most of the time my main gig is writing and writing books, and obviously Jim does comedy, and I think when I started talking to him about it. We've got a mutual love, and that is Crystal Palace Football Club. Okay, which normally when I say to people, they go, "Oh." But yeah, so we got this mutual thing, and he does a Palace podcast, which I'm an avid listener to. And I've always really liked Jim's energy and stuff on that. So I knew that I wanted to do something with him. And we got chatting. I said, I'll think about doing a podcast. And I said, but I don't know what to do it about. But I've got this idea that maybe I'm going through a bit of a tricky time writing wise. Kind of why I wanted to do a podcast, because I was finding that I just couldn't write anything. I was really struggling with, I know some people I've talked to other writers and they don't kind of believe in this idea of writer's block. But
Really?
yeah, I've talked to a few writers, and actually recently they said, no, there's no such thing. You can and I think there is. There is something like, I think we all, whatever you do in life, I think, whatever, not even in creative industries, just general day-to-day kind of thing. We all have those kind of blocks and blanks in memory. Anyway, I said about this, and I said to Jim, how do you feel about it? He said, well, this is quite coincidental, because he says, I've not done stand-up for like 18 months or something. He said, I've really got the fear for getting back out and doing stand-up. And so we sort of thought, well, this is obviously there is some legs in this. And I said, well, let me see if I can get some people, some well-known people to come on and talk to us. Maybe they can give us some advice, because that was the kind of the idea, and it being particularly about creativity. But we realized as soon as we started recording that the blank thing, I inverted commas, means so much it means different things to different people. And it wasn't just about creativity. It was things like imposter syndrome, public failure, social anxiety. It was kind of, blank meant difficult moment, really. It was those difficult moments in life that we go through, and they often are the sort of catalyst for having like a blank or a blank time. So so that's what the podcast was about. And then again, early on in the process, I thought I really wanted to develop the idea of this blank and blankness and that faltering we have in life. And I said to Jim that maybe we could do like a blog that's an additional to the podcast, because we have an hour or so with guests, but you kind of want to develop those ideas and look into those ideas and explore them more. And then I kind of thought, well, I'm in the book industry. Maybe a book might be quite good, and we could use some of the transcript from the podcast and kind of use that to illustrate our own experiences of this, and kind of came up with a pitch, and then started sending it out to a few places to see if anyone would want to publish it.
It's a great book, though. I've really, really enjoyed reading it, and I think Howard Stern did like a similar thing where he took transcripts from his interviews over the past 30 years. And I remember thinking, no, I don't think I'd be into like reading an interview, but I really enjoyed like the stories that you had from the podcast, and your guests obviously are amazing. So it obviously makes it all the better. But and particularly with Jim, I found like comedy is something that I think is so scary. Like I can't imagine getting up on stage and like trying to make people laugh. It must be so demoralizing, and he really gets that across when you bomb, as they say. But how did you find writing a book with another person? Is that a much more difficult process, or?
Well, I have to say this book was really a joy to do. I really enjoyed it. It's the first time I've written non-fiction. I mean, my background is mainly like I've written children's books, and then more recently I've done a couple of novels for adults. Quite niche kind of verse novels as well, so not kind of run-of-the-mill stuff. So doing a non-fiction book was not something. I've done some articles and stuff for magazines and papers and things, but I'm not trained journalist or anything like that. But I enjoyed that aspect of it, researching the ideas. I mean, so like you, I'd read a few podcast spin-off books. I think Mark Maron had done one, which again very much full transcripts, and I kind of thought, actually, we don't really want to do that. You don't want it to just be like transcript. That is boring. You can just go listen to the podcast. How can we sort of change that a little bit and make it more about kind of our kind of experiences with these things, and then sort of interpret and paraphrase some of those things that we've learned along the way with our guests. and again, that was something we did with the publisher, was to actually paraphrase those sections in the book rather than having them as just plain transcript. So that was quite a nice way of doing it. But yeah, sorry, going back to your question, it was really enjoyable working with someone else, actually. Like, I mean, thinking that, you know, we pitched this book and I had written a few ideas and stuff, and then sort of saying, you know, you got to go and write 80,000 words, and thinking, oh man, like it's a lot, you know, a lot to sort of suddenly fathom that you've got to do. And then obviously that's cut in two, so there's 40,000 words. I was like, okay, that's more doable. So that's good. So from a practical point, like logistical point of view, it's like half the work.
Works out well, yeah.
But actually, you know, we get on so well, Jim and I, and because we've sort of built up this rapport of doing the podcast, actually, you know, sharing notes, and I mean, in the book we've got quite separate voices, you know, so I do my sort of take on these particular themes and subjects, and then Jim does his own. So we kind of wrote those things very separately, but then obviously we were able to come together, and we had like a Google Drive. We could just shove the manuscript on, and then we could sort of go over each other's notes and go over each other's sections to see if they were, you know, working well and that kind of stuff. So it was actually really, really pleasurable experience. I've always enjoyed collaboration. So like back, you know, I've always played in bands, and then obviously doing the podcast in the first place, I really wanted to do it with someone else and have a different, you know, have two voices in the room, with as well as the guest. So I think it just was another step in for that collaboration, and I really enjoyed that kind of aspect of things.
Yeah, you have a fascinating story, actually. I've obviously been looking into you and your band Little Ten, and the fact that you played to Glastonbury and, you know, various things like that. So interesting. And you know, like a writer and being in the creative industry is obviously quite a difficult thing to make money from, and probably even more difficult at the minute. So, you know, I'm sure you've had kind of like to struggle a lot in the last probably 20, 30 years in those different industries that you've gone into.
Yeah. I mean, it's both. Yeah, they're all really perilous. I mean, music, like, I mean, also, I don't know what it's like now, because you know, I still play in a band, but we don't gig, and we will occasionally release stuff on Spotify. But I mean, back in when I was doing like playing in bands and gigging, you know, it was just about gigging as much as possible, and there was obviously no streaming sites or anything like that, so it was much harder to get your music out there. You know, you were just trying to sort of tout CDs at gigs, and
Right.
you know, sending out stuff to promoters and trying to get gigs, and it was a totally different kind of landscape. I guess now it's much easier to get your music in front of people, but then I guess there are more people are able to do that. So the field is more crowded. So there are I guess there are different challenges, but being all creative industries are always really, really competitive and difficult to sort of meander through. And like you say, yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge, and one that I've, you know, constantly kind of considered not pursuing any further, because, you know, there's only so many rejections you can get, only so many kind of bad moments that you can sort of take. You know, the good ones are far fewer. So yeah, it takes its toll after a while, for sure. And yeah, I wouldn't, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. There's been moments where, yeah, I thought, well, I'll just go and get a regular job.
Do you think it's harder to be a writer than, say, like a musician, where you get that buzz in front of someone, where, you know, the adrenaline rush is probably a lot more regular with music, or say you're like a sports star or whatever, whereas with writing it's a lot of like just on your own, like you're
And yeah, it's very hard to get that validation, like that instant, like you say, that instant validation that you can get from being in a band. But I found it really difficult moving from the music industry as well into the publishing industry, which the music industry is very buzzy and vibey and quick and fast turnover, and like you say, you're getting to perform and stuff, so you're out doing stuff all the time, whereas publishing is quite slow and very much like more pragmatic, and there's things that are set in stone far further ahead. You know, you've got book deals. If you get a book deal, it's unlikely your book's going to come out for at least a year, if not longer. Sometimes, you know, I had my first book, it took 3 or 4 years to come out, which is crazy, really. You know, whereas, like you say, you're gigging, you're able to kind of constantly keep working on stuff. Whereas I think, also what I found with publishing is it's very often really difficult to hear back from people like, editors and agents and stuff. There's not the same kind of turnaround and response times are much slower. So I found it really, really tricky. And then obviously on top of that, like you say, you've got that isolation of being, particularly in the first, when you get a publishing deal, obviously it becomes more collaborative. You're working with editors and sales teams and designers and all that kind of stuff. So it does become a more collaborative experience. But certainly when you're producing the work, or certainly like coming up with ideas and pitching stuff, you are very much on your own. And again, it's why I liked being in bands and stuff, is that collaboration, and I found it quite stark when I started doing it just by myself.
Yeah, I'd say it takes a certain type of personality to to be on your own for that length of time. And would you call this book like self-help, or what kind of genre do you think this falls into?
Yeah, I guess it is a little bit like that. I mean, I've sort of described it as being slightly memoir, a little bit self-help. I think there's elements in there that are both those things, really. I think it kind of evolved as we were writing it. I think we kind of set out to make it more of like probably more like a self-help book, but it's become more of a memoir in certain respects, because obviously Jim and I are very candid in it about our own experiences. So yeah, and obviously it's also a companion to the podcast and the themes that come up in the podcast as well. So it's got all these kind of elements to it, which is quite nice. It's nice not to be able to pigeonhole. We're, again, in creative industries, we're always looking to pigeonhole like everything, like it's got to be this and it's got to sound like that. And, you say, when films come out, it's like this and it's like that. And then, we're always looking for those, where does that get inspired, and what is that like? It was like, what's it like? What's it like? So I think, yes, it is kind of those two things, but obviously it's a lot of other things as well. So yeah,
really, you guys are really candid in it, and you get it really into depth into your life stories and kind of different things that have happened in your life. And one thing I really liked about it was kind of I didn't look at the chapters before starting reading it. So like every time I finished a chapter, it was just like, oh, okay, we're talking about this now. It's something completely new. It was like, okay, we're going to be talking about sleep. This was not what I was expecting to come up now. So I found that really good. And like just a lot of things I think people really, they saw it covers such a vast array of topics that there's obviously going to be something for everyone in there. But how did you find that where you were putting something so kind of personal out there? Obviously you speak about grief, which is some really sad moments in that chapter, and social anxiety. So you're kind of getting into the most vulnerable times of your life. Did you, I suppose I would always assume when people are writing, they're at a stage where they feel comfortable enough to do it, but then you hear people talk about it after and they're like, they didn't really know what the response was going to be after. Like, how did you feel putting stuff out there?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose with the book, we were kind of turning the tables a little bit from the podcast. We would now be in the more of a focus, and we were able to sort of talk about our own experiences with blank and blankness. For me, it felt right to include those things in the book. I guess, again, because the guests on the podcast are so open and candid with us, it felt like I owed it to like them in a certain respect to be like that myself within the book. And I know, but I know as well that Jim has spoken to me, and I think he's spoken about it openly, that he was quite worried about some of the stuff he'd put in there. Was he being too near the knuckle with some of his own experiences? And and it's his first book as well, so there's that added kind of pressure and worry about how it's going to be received, I suppose. But for me, it felt like it was the right time to talk about those things, and it was the right book to do that in. I'm not ever going to. I don't think I'm ever going to be someone that's going to write a memoir as such. So I think this gave me the opportunity to talk about some of those things, and I think they're things that I'm quite open on social media and stuff with with things that I've gone through in my life, and I felt like, again, this was people who know me and follow me on Twitter and Facebook, whatever, will know that these things are part of who I am, and I've always been fairly open about a lot of these things, and this is just an extension of that, and again, letting people who I know have responded to those things and it's resonated with them, this is a chance for them to resonate even more, I suppose.
Yeah. Is it difficult though when you're being vulnerable and it includes like someone else? Say, for example, when you're speaking about like fertility, that obviously your wife has a massive part to play in that, and it's not as if there was anything bad written about her in that, but it's just it's going to include someone else, and you don't know if they're ready for that to be made public. Like, how do you have those kind of conversations?
Well, yeah, I mean, I very much, I think with that one particularly, I obviously I've spoken to my wife through the whole, and she's been a sounding board as well for me with regards to all my writing, really. So yeah, this was no different with that experience, and I think she trusts me with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we also delve into stories that are in the public sphere as well. There's things about in the public failure chapter, there's stuff about a prominent influencer who had a sort of public meltdown, public failure, and that was we wanted to get that right. We didn't want to tell that, if we're telling other people's stories as well, you want to kind of get that right and not so that was something that we worked with the editor and got the kind of blessing from them, and tried to sort of make sure that we got those things right, because you're becoming a more journalist in those moments as well, and that's always tricky to have. I mean, don't want to upset anybody. Certainly we don't want to upset anybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. But no, I think some really good anecdotes for sure. Yeah, I suppose if we could dive into one of the chapters, when you're talking about social media, as you kind of brought up there, that you try to be kind of as positive as possible, and that was something that I was struck with was how you said that you've kind of had like positive experiences with social media for the most part. And I'm wondering, do you think it's kind of like cool at the minute to be like anti-social media?
I think a lot of people are anti-social media. It's funny. I know. Funny enough, I put a tweet up the other day saying it's social media, not anti-social media, because people are, because I think obviously, like I say in the book, is I've had a fairly positive. I mean, this podcast wouldn't have happened without Twitter. That's for sure. Like I can't get a lot of the guests on without Twitter. I'm messaging people on that platform, so a lot of the connections and the creative opportunities I've had have been through social media. So I can't bash it as much as some other people might. I think these platforms have changed, I guess, from their initial creation of being places where you can connect with people, have conversations with people, tell people about what you're doing, to being, which has happened now in society, this kind of binary kind of thing where you've got one side or the other, and unfortunately there's the nuance has left the building as such, so people aren't having conversations anymore. They're shouting at each other basically, and I think that's something that I try to address within my own community on those forums and platforms. That's something I'm passionate about, trying to change things a little bit if I can, even if it's just within my my following and my group of people that follow me, to sort of say there's another way of doing this. You don't have to be shouting at one another. We can have really, really decent conversations. And if you don't agree with someone, that's fine. It's good. It's good to have debate. But, we don't have to shout at one another. We can talk about these things. And I think we'll get a lot more done if we can do that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there is I think it is kind of cool to be anti-social. I think people are, I guess people are starting to turn off.
Yeah. Perhaps. What age are your children, if you don't mind me asking?
They're 14 and 12.
Do they have social media?
No, they're not. They're two boys. They're not massively, like, they're not social animals by any means. They've got their own little sets of groups of friends. They're both really into kind of video games and stuff. So that's kind of what they're into. They're not really into sport or anything like that. They've never ever mentioned social media to me. Nothing.
Really?
Well, I think my eldest, 14, some of his peer group have got like Instagram, but he's never shown any interest at all in joining a social media platform. I don't know whether that, in some respects, they're kind of turned off of it because they kind of know that I have a bit of a presence on some of these things, and it's like, okay, so Dad's kind of there, and he kind of knows what's. I don't. They end up blocking me or something, but but I don't know. I can't speak for them in that respect, but I think they know that. I guess they know that I use social media quite a lot, and maybe it's like, Dad's on that. It's not cool.
Yeah, but if like they came to you tomorrow and were like, Dad, I want to go on Twitter, for example, would you just be, yeah, go on, or would you sit them down, explain to them, okay, this is what happens, or do you, like?
Yeah, it's like the new birds and bees conversation, isn't it? Yeah. This is social media. This is what you can do. Just be careful. There are preventative things you can put in place. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess if they came to me and said, like, I want to join Twitter and Instagram, I'd be fine about that. But I guess, yeah, I'd make them aware that these places aren't always the nicest places to dwell, and just to be careful. Yeah, I think it would be that you'd be having that kind of like you would with anything. If they were going out late at night or something, you'd be having those same conversations. So I suppose, yeah, don't read the comments. I suppose I'd probably say don't read the comments.
Yeah, and you mentioned there social media is not a good place to have conversations, and one of the chapters is about the importance of conversations. And obviously we're doing this through Zoom, but I think it's still as close to a conversation as you can have that's not in person. But I really liked the quote, I think, at the start of that chapter, and I have the end of it. It's just talking about like embrace a conversation with someone, because like even if you disagree with everything that they say, that one thing that they might say might save your life for whatever reason. And I really like that quote, because it's always struck me that sometimes the least likely person in your head can just say something so profound and or relate to something that you've had an experience in that you never thought that they would have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a quote of a quote. I think it's Sanjeev Bhaskar talking about a conversation he had with Alan Alda, who also does a great podcast. He used to be in MASH, and I think, yeah, he's a great actor. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought it was a beautiful quote, and I think, yeah, it's so important that we have. Yeah, I think I guess maybe we've lost the art of conversation to a certain extent with regards to, like when we see people in cafes and stuff, and they're just on their phones, and they're not interacting, and all that kind of stuff has become more prevalent, I guess, in recent years. And I guess one of the reasons why I wanted to start the podcast in the first place was so that we could actually have some conversations with people, and for a good length of time as well, not just a kind of shooting the shit, just a kind of to get someone and talk to them for an hour without any distractions. And I guess that is, again, why you get these wonderful moments. You get these moments of candidity, because people are able to just sit and, the connection. We are, we're animals at the end of the day, and we need that connection with one another. And I think true conversations are the best way that we can connect with one another and share ideas. And yeah, and I think, again, I think that's something that we need to do better at as a society.
But like, it is crazy because podcasts are like booming, and it's all long form interviews, long form conversations. So there's obviously a massive desire to have these conversations. And I think even for, say, someone, like yourself or anyone in the public, like instead of going on to BBC or something, having an 8-minute slot where, it's just like quick fire questions, basically, where you can actually tease things out, get like, and bring back that nuance, as you mentioned earlier. Like, this seems like the best form to be able to do that.
Yeah, there's such an appetite for it, and I think there's an appetite to listen to that as well, to listen to new ideas, hear people's stories properly. Like you say, I guess most of the time we've kind of like with like radio and TV, we just get snippets, and it could be someone who's got a new show out or a new book out. I mean, we've been doing lots of press for the book, but I much prefer coming on talking to you for 40 minutes about the book, and we can really delve into it. Whereas, I've got 2 minutes before the news starts. It's quickly tell us everything about what's in this, but you can't really.
Yeah.
And so you don't get to again, those new, we've said with lots of that nuance, and maybe because we live in this sort of fast-paced society, that's part of why nuance has kind of dissipated and disappeared.
No, there's definitely something there. It's just how do we get it back? And TV, I think, definitely has played a role, like short attention spans, and maybe just even the assumption that we have short attention spans rather than it actually being the case.
Well, I think that's very true. Actually, I think that's very true, and I think that's become prevalent. I think really, and I think TV and YouTube. I mean, we've seen it this week with the Super League stuff. when the chairman of Real Madrid came out, and Perez, I think his name is, came out. Yeah, guys, look. Young people don't like 90 minutes of football. They can't cope with it. So let's make it shorter. And we've seen it in cricket and stuff as well. Where and I think there's something to be said for like the short games and stuff. But I'm not sure about. I don't think in football it will work. But
no.
That is, again, it's that kind of indicative. We can't. Maybe we're not giving, or just people, not just younger people, the kind of benefit of the doubt in regards to that there's clearly an appetite for longer form things. There's clearly, who's the biggest podcaster in the world? Joe Rogan. Most of his shows are 2-3 hours, sometimes 5 hours. He's had guests on for. There's clearly an appetite for these things, and so I think, we need to kind of. I think broadcasters in general need to sort of rethink that a little bit and maybe kind of invest a little bit more in time.
Yeah, I wonder, will it just kind of die out though before they realize? So under like ad pressure and to make money, I think it will always just be an issue. But did you sleep well last night, or what? What's your kind of regular sleep schedule?
Slept all right last night, actually. Yeah, I mean, I always kind of call myself a sort of part-time insomniac because I have sort of periods. I know, and I talked to someone's proper full-time insomniacs. We had David Baddiel on, and I mentioned it to him, and he said, "There's no such thing as a part-time insomniac." But I think, I have sort of periods of really good sleep and then periods of not so good sleep.
And like, what's the, like, when you're part-time insomniac, is it like 2 hours sleep a night, or how bad does it get?
I think it's broken sleep more really. So, sleep for a couple of hours, wake, and then wake for a couple of hours and then sleep for an hour, so it's really bitty. So it might get 4 hours sleep of a night, but it will be, cut up into chunks. And then you just feel that horrible kind of rough feeling in the morning, which I think I read that it's the reason you need like sort of 7 hours is that kind of nurturing sleep where your brain gets to sort of really kind of process a lot of the proteins and stuff in your brain, and so that you get that rich sleep. I think if you, like, for example, if you woke at 4 in the morning and then you just drifted back to sleep till 6, that 2 hours isn't enough for your body to start regenerating cells and stuff. So it's not good sleep. So even though you think, I've had another 2 hours sleep, it's not actually that. So you generally feel a bit manky when you get out.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm really trying to prioritize at the minute because I was listening to a lot of Matthew Walker, who I know you mentioned in the book, and he's such an interesting guy. But do you think that your insomnia might be a residual effect from your early years as like a rock star, or is it that this is just something that you always had?
Yeah, I think probably those days in the band. I've never been referred to as a rock star before, so thank you for that. But yeah, I think, I would definitely say, I mean, obviously I talk about that in the book a bit. Definitely, I think those late nights, like touring and gigging late, and I guess and I've talked to other people in performance, like, I mean, comedians as well, they do late night gigs, and then you're pumped and adrenaline's pumping around, and you're really hot, even if the gig's not been that great, you're still kind of hyped up because you've been performing. And then, trying to relax after that. And then obviously it's very late by the time you're starting to relax. It could be 1, 2 in the morning. And then I mean, with the band, we used to sort of kip in the back of vans and stuff in motorway services. It was uncomfortable. You only get a couple of hours sleep, and so I think that just became the norm. And then I guess I lived with one of the guys in the band. I think we just stayed up late watching movies and stuff. So it was all like kind of like a catalyst. And I think you just get into these sleep patterns and habits, and then having children later on kills it as well.
Can't imagine that helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think the days like when you don't have sleep, is it a mood thing that you have, or is it increased anxiety, or just kind of all of the above?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. Yeah, you just feel kind of generally weak. Like, and I meant like weak mentally, weak physically. Yeah, you're just sort of running on empty sometimes. So yeah, it's that kind of being 50% less of a person.
Do you drink much?
No, I'm teetotal.
So, always, or?
I stopped drinking in what was it? I was 1998, I think it was. 90 years, just after my father passed away. I had a problem with drink. I had a really bad relationship with alcohol. A lot of binge drinking, and I could see myself heading into some sort of dark, murky waters. So yeah, I sort of abstinence-based recovery and just gave it all up. And I haven't drunk since. So yeah, I can't use that as an excuse.
And how hard was that at the time? Because I'm sure, you're going to gigs, you're with your mates. What was like? I'm sure the pressure was unbearable at times.
Yeah, there were moments of that, and actually, but then I had some really supportive friends. I had a couple of friends who were straight edge, because sort of into that kind of post-hardcore scene, and so it didn't feel, some people were actually really supportive about it and were fine. And then kind of, once you've explained kind of some of the reasons, and then it becomes more clear. But yeah, even now, like people kind of find it a bit difficult. Like, I went to a stag do a couple of years ago, and the amount of questions I got, it was
So
weird.
you do attend all those type of things? Would you go to a pub on a Friday night pre-COVID or?
Yeah. I'd go and I drink a fizzy pop or whatever. I'm happy to be in that environment. I'm very chilled about how I am, and and I have no. Yeah, I don't ever feel the desire to drink or anything like that. So I'm pretty chilled in that respect. But yeah, it's more other people that find it weirder.
Yeah. No, I've listened a lot to Andy Ramage. I don't know if you've come across him. He runs that 1 year now beer. But yeah, he's always talking about it's other people's. Just put a pint in front of you there and pretend like you're drinking, kind of thing. Obviously I'm Irish, but I think UK is quite similar culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a big part of our culture, and some people do really find it difficult to understand, to comprehend. You don't want to say, well, this is the reason why. I don't want to go into like you don't often want to go into sort of the real personal kind of side of things. Then that's like, oh, didn't need that kind of downward spiral in the conversation. So yeah, I think it's becoming easier. I think there are less people drinking now, people more health conscious. There are a lot of more the sort of artisan beer companies are making non-alcoholic beers and stuff. So again, it's less of a thing. I know a few people that have had difficulties with alcohol, and they will, at gatherings and stuff, they will often have a Bex Blue or whatever, have something that, so that they don't get asked those questions sometimes, so if there's, for some people that they need that kind of ease, and that's absolutely fine as well. I think, if sometimes you need a prop to deal with social situations, so it's that's fine.
Yeah, no, for sure. Whatever works for you. And you describe yourself as an introvert, which I find interesting because you're doing podcasts and stuff like that. And I think, I can't remember the quote now, but you were talking about when you were in secondary school, but when you were younger, your kind of default position was to be like the most extroverted person in the world to kind of overcome your introvertedness. And I found that really interesting, and it kind of goes against everything that like we think, if that makes sense, because like how can an introvert be an extrovert? it seems like that shouldn't be a possible thing.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? I think having talked to a lot of actors that come on the podcast, it's quite common. A lot of actors are really quite shy and reserved individuals. But again, when they're, but they use their performance to be a way of combating maybe that. And I know an awful lot of actors. In fact, we had one on this week who finds it incredibly difficult in social situations, particularly like groups. I mean, I'm fine one-to-one. I'm pretty outgoing in those moments. But I think, large groups, new people, in groups. I mean, like in social, in more in the real world kind of thing, not so much online. But I do find those that I sometimes go in on myself quite a lot. But I think it is quite a common thing for introverts to do extrovert jobs, or certainly a lot of creative people, I think, are introverted in one way or another.
There's a story you tell, and I can't remember the woman's name, but she moves to New York, and she's an incredibly like shy person, country person, and she basically like realizes that she can reinvent herself because no one knows her in that environment. And I found that idea really interesting because it's something that it really resonated with me in terms of when you go into a new environment, you can just be who you want, and it's a really like freeing like feeling to know that, okay, these people have no context to who I was or who I am. Like, not that you have any skeletons in your past, but just you just feel free.
Yeah, that was Dawn French, actually. Yeah, Dawn French said about doing that when she went to, it was an acting course or something, or something to do with her university. I think she did an exchange. So she could go to New York and say she was someone completely different. And and there's something quite exciting about doing that, I can imagine, actually. I remember when I was a kid going up to Northumberland, my dad was from Durham, and we used to spend summer holidays up there. And I remember like sort of second cousins would hang out with their mates, and then I'd go and hang out with them, and I would sometimes sort of like exaggerate or as kids do sometimes, sort of say like all these things that I've been up to, and just, I guess, to feel accepted, which I guess we all do to a certain extent when we are. I guess we're all spinning a little bit when we're in social situations to a certain extent. What we do, who we are. I mean, some people are not. Some people are very much how they are and how they seem. But I guess we all a little bit sort of, just thinking that now, like we're all sort of spinning plates a little bit and spinning who we are and where we've come from and what we do to make it maybe sound a little bit palatable in some way.
Yeah. But as well, you don't know how the other person is going to like receive that, if that makes sense. Like, when you've built someone up in your head because they've told you something, but then you actually get to know them more, and that thing is actually really insignificant or not actually as cool as you originally thought when they first told you.
Yeah, well, that happens as well, and obviously that's that's awkward. If you're sort of spinning a yarn about some amazing thing you've done, and the other person's like, again, that's all part of that kind of socialness, isn't it? That we the travails of social interaction that we have with one another. I guess we're always testing. Maybe we're always sort of testing the water a little bit with other people to see what they're. I guess maybe we're trying to find our like-minded people and finding our tribes, aren't we? With the things we put out there and the conversations we have and where we go to in those conversations.
Yeah, and obviously you go through a lot of vulnerabilities in the book, but do you feel comfortable in yourself?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, and I have to say, I think I am. Like, obviously, we've talked about quite a lot of the neurosis and stuff that I've got in my life, but yeah, I do feel comfortable with myself. I am comfortable with who I am, and like I say, like I'm happy to go and sit in a pub and not drink, and I'm happy to talk about why I don't drink. I'm not. I think going back to the days in the band, I think we're all enough talking about the band, and we were all quite introverted people, individuals, quite unique individuals as well. All our different sort of foibles and anxieties and neurosis about stuff, which is the same for everybody. But we we all were thoughtful of one another, and I think we've always been thoughtful about how we interact with other people and take people as they come. And that's something that I've always taken away from those times. And actually, being comfortable with who you are and what you like.
Just I'm 23. What age do you think you got to that kind of stage?
I think I was quite. I mean, I think at a young age I was fairly comfortable with what I liked, what I was into. I think that's a big part of it as well. I think if you know what you're into and what you like doing and your interests, that kind of starts to define you a little bit. And I think if you're really, I think I was ravenous for music. I was always into reading and doing creative things, and that is a large part of what defines me as a human, as a person. So I think early doors, I was very open about and very comfortable with what the stuff I was into, and then you start to meet those people that are also into those things. So I think probably going back to those days in band, which is probably in my early 20s.
It's good though. I think I don't know if a lot of people would say that young.
Yeah, I think I don't know that it might have been I guess maybe it was just like a youthful confidence with regards to what, like I say, what I was into and what I liked and what I wanted to do as well. Like I always knew that I wanted to do creative stuff from a very young age. So having that kind of bloody-minded kind of sensibility, think about those things meant that I could really focus. And I guess that's part of it as well, being able to focus on what you want to do and where you want to go with your life.
Yeah, so you've written this book, you've got the podcast, and you're still relatively young. What's kind of the end goal now for the next few years? You obviously talk about kind of planning and stuff a bit in the book, or having a goal and a vision.
Yeah, I mean, just to keep creating. I mean, it's always exciting to create new things, and I've got another book coming out later on in the year. So yeah, I'm always looking to write and create and make things and start new projects, working with people. I'm hoping to do a music project with a producer friend of mine called Paul Pilot, who's in Coleraine, actually. I don't know if you know that area of Ireland.
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a fantastic producer. He's done stuff for Duke Special and The Athlete and all sorts of stuff, and he does soundtracks and stuff. So we're hoping to put together a music project. So I'm really excited about trying to do that in the next 18 months. He's based in Berlin, so it's obviously just always tricky when you're not sort of nearby. But so always looking to create and work with people and get to know new people, and it's lovely, and continue to having lovely conversations with people. I love doing podcasts like this. You get to have conversations with people and get to know people, and it's that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, definitely. And have you got your vaccine? Actually, you mentioned Berlin and travel and all that.
I've had my first one. Yeah. I'm waiting for my call up for the second one. So I've had my first one. Yeah.
Oh, the UK, I'm telling you, ahead of us all these days.
The only thing the government has done right in the last 10 years. So yeah, no, I feel very privileged to have had it done, and just wait for my second one. So
yeah. So fingers crossed, kind of a bit of travel can go on and things will open up, because I think everyone's dying to do a few things now and get creating actually physically together. I think will be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I miss that, and getting together with people. Obviously, we've missed that close interaction that we can have with even with close friends and stuff we haven't been able to do. So yeah, it'd be lovely to just be nice to have. We've got a little garden, have people around and have a barbecue or something. That just to be able to do that would be really lovely at this stage.
No, it's been brilliant to talk to you, and I've really enjoyed reading the book. And
thank you.
I've also I wasn't a listener of the podcast before, but I've listened to a lot of it recently and absolutely loving it. Such a great podcast. Unbelievable guests as well. Really, really good guests.
So lucky. Yeah, we've been so lucky with the people that have come on. And sometimes I message Jim and say, oh, we've got so and so's coming on. He's like, what? I'm like, you think, how have we managed this? So it's a weird thing. And I think sometimes it is because people want they like having those long form conversations, but I think there's something in being able to talk about those difficult moments in a nice environment with people that aren't gonna. We're not looking for clickbait. We're not looking to pull anyone's pants down. We just want to have a nice conversation with people and allow people the freedom and facilitate a conversation that allows them to be open and speak freely.
Yeah.
So that's one. I think that's got a lot to do with the fact we've had so many great guests on.
Yeah, developing that trust though is key and probably a difficult thing.
Yeah, and it's again, it goes back to the benefits of social media. I've been able to kind of connect with people and have conversations, and sometimes it can take a long time to get people to come on because of schedules and whatsoever. But in that time, you're constantly having conversations and building up a rapport with people, and then you get to be able to see what people are actually like and sort of behind closed doors, and I can honestly say, on hand on heart, that everyone we've had on has been absolutely lovely. We've had no one's been horrible or prima donna or anything. Like they've been all really, really lovely. The bigger the star as well, I would say the less attitude they've got as well. So I think we've been so lucky with the guests we've had on. Yeah,
and I think the vast majority of people, I'm sure you'll agree, are good, decent people. I think that's something you realize and give people the benefit of the doubt as well if they're not being the best. As much as you can.
And you can figure that out fairly soon. You can feel an energy from even in like messages. You can sort of sense an energy in someone, and then if that happens, you just think, well, okay, I'll walk away from that then. Maybe that's not meant. Do I want to spend an hour talking to that person? It's not happened very often, but occasionally there will be someone you think, okay, it's fine. Because actually that's not going to be enjoyable. They're not going to enjoy it. We're not going to enjoy it. So.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad you didn't find that from me anyway.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks so much. And everyone go buy the book. Great read, and you'll definitely enjoy it. So, and learn a lot too, which is great. But no, thank you so much, and hopefully speak to you again soon, sometime in person.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, well, I'd love to come on and tell you about my favorite books as well. So I'd love to come on and talk.
Well, then you're in the diary, so I'll be getting back on to you.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Gent, talk to you then. Thank you.